because of how we collect the information and the way we get it at a very granular level about what makes up a particular waste stream. So a waste stream would be a combination of a bunch of different things. But because we understand the waste at an ingredient level, we believe that there's an opportunity for us to play in the circular economy model where we begin to offer materials that had previously been destined for landfill and for disposal, reintroducing it back into the supply chain up on the front side of the manufacturing process and help to ultimately reduce the reliance on our natural resources.
Let's discover the Cleveland entrepreneurial ecosystem. We are telling the stories of its entrepreneurs and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland. I'm your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with Dan Collins. And Dan is a veteran of the waste industry, bringing more than 30 years of experience to the space, which he leveraged to found Wastebits back in 2014. And since then, Wastebits now provides a full-service waste platform that connects the disparate parties in the space, from waste generators to waste facilities to service providers. And Wastebits now supports clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies to small and medium independent service providers across North America and beyond, with a focus on reducing the pain of waste categorization by helping these organizations understand and take immediate action on their waste streams to improve operational performance and reduce costs. And I know that these terms are industry terms, and we will define them and dive much deeper into them over the course of our conversation. But I really loved learning about the waste management space and exploring Dan's depth of experience and entrepreneurial learnings building Wastebits over the last 10 years. I hope you all enjoy my conversation with Dan Collins. So I was thinking about the best place to start this conversation and where that might be. And I thought it would be to maybe talk about the industry of waste management and what got you into it originally. And thinking through it, I was reminded of this book that I read back in middle school when I first got into investing called Common Stocks and Uncommon Profits. It was by this guy, Peter Lynch. And really one of the only lessons that stuck with me from that book was that there is often the greatest opportunity where others don't want to look because it either is too niche or too difficult or too unsexy. And in my own career, it is precisely in the unsexy and niche and difficult that I have devoted my time, from election infrastructure to healthcare credentialing. And these are not, the industries that young children grow up aspiring to be in one day necessarily. And so I'd love to hear the story of how it is you came to the waste management industry and where your kind of entrepreneurial proclivity comes from.
No, that's a good question. So the waste industry as a whole is one of those, people have always said it's recession resistant, right? So not recession proof, but the industry itself it's actually very complex, and there's a lot of different silos in it. And so how I got started in the industry, believe it or not, was back in high school. So in high school, I had a job working for a company that, I had no idea what kind of business they were in. But, turns out years later, I kind of now know a little bit more about it. But I was unloading hazardous waste off the back of trucks as a warehouse guy when I was 16 years old. It was my second job. And so I started kind of in the warehouse unloading trucks. And then, as I went through college, then I was able to become more of a route driver and more kind of customer facing. I've literally spent my entire career in this space and started in the warehouse and have kind of worked my way up through the organizations, anything from operations to sales and sales marketing to starting a company called Wastebits. And so we, it's an area of business that, as you mentioned, most people don't think of. It's definitely not sexy, but one thing's for sure is people generate trash. Even through the latest pandemic, one of the challenges the industry had is as everybody went home and was forced to go home, begin to think about what we all did is we began to clean out our closets and do home remediation and like renovations. And so we ended up generating a lot more garbage at home than we do like when we were working. So the industry actually, while their revenues were down, their volumes were up substantially because of how we acted in the things that we did.
It does seem to be one of those industries where it's this like hidden layer of society, or everyone understands that. I think the scale and gravity of waste management and the importance of it, but that no one really quite understands unless you are in it yourself, what actually is going on behind the scenes there.
I would tell you they're in the industry, they call it NIMBY, not in my backyard, right? So nobody wants these disposal assets, these landfills, these recycle centers. They don't want them in their backyard, in their neighborhoods. But yet, at the end of the day, every week, I'm 50 years old, right? As long as I can remember, we push the trash can out to the end of the driveway every week, right? And it magically disappears. Well, guess what? It goes somewhere, right? And so, we as a society, we've continued to struggle with recycling and waste minimization. We just continually expect it to happen. And so behind the scenes, there's a lot to it. But at the end of the day, the companies like that are in this space, they do well, they make a lot of profits, but it's a dirty and old industry that really has been pretty resistant to change.
Yeah, over the course of your time in the industry, just exploring what actually happens after people bring the trash out of their driveway every week, and seeing kind of maybe the dearth of technology and kind of how antiquated maybe aspects of the industry are, as we make our way towards Wastebits and the work that you've done there. What were some of the problems that you witnessed within the industry that's at least started getting you thinking about what can I do to maybe improve some of these processes and the way things are done?
I think to answer the question, I first probably need to kind of describe a little bit about the area of the industry where I've spent my career and where we specialize in the problems that we're really trying to solve. So, generally speaking, when you think about non-hazardous waste like garbage and trash and things of that nature, or even on the hazardous waste side of the business, there's two aspects of it. There's the collection side, which is what happens as they're collecting it, and then there's the post-collection. So it's the way that they process the recycle centers, the landfills, things of that nature. And so inside of those two markets, I've spent my career primarily on the post-collection side of the business, so more on the operations side and then on the sales and marketing. But the other kind of break and separation is the waste types. And so, general household garbage, construction, like a construction project, those are all pretty standard waste streams that just show up at the gates and they process them in the landfills. The non-hazardous industrial waste, the hazardous waste, things like used motor oil, which is a universal waste, and paint and things of that nature. I've spent my career more on the regulated side of the industry. And so, the problem that I witnessed as I spent all these years in the organizations is that not only are the companies siloed, so inside of the companies, most of the big waste companies have been built through merger and acquisition, and so they run a lot of different operating systems to accomplish the same things. It's very uncommon, or it's very common rather, for a waste company that says they have 100 locations where they process materials. It's very common for them to be on 30 and 40 different IT systems and and roll all this information in. But the problem that comes up along with, as you can imagine, trying to manage all this different infrastructure. But the problem is that when they work with these large national customer bases, the Sherwin-Williams of the world, the Goodyear Tire and Rubbers of the world, where they have thousands of locations across America, they want a consistent experience. They want to be able to go to one place and get the same information that is consistent across their entire enterprise. And so inside of the companies themselves, there's a challenge in achieving this, but every company then is different. And so, it is very much a siloed industry where there is no collaboration really amongst industry players, but a lot of times there's no collaboration even inside of the companies themselves. And so those are the high level problems that I saw that I feel like there's an opportunity to address.
Got it. And to kind of paint a little bit more of the contextual picture here, who are the stakeholders in the industry? I know you have kind of the facilities, the providers, the generators of waste, us people, but how do you think about those stakeholders and how they interface with the overall like infrastructure, but also from the business side of things?
There's really, I would call them 4 different key stakeholders. There's the processors, the generators of the waste, the people that are providing the service in the middle, and then the regulators, right? So, the Ohio EPA, the US EPA, so the government agencies and the state agencies that are trying to administer it. And if you kind of break, whether it's in post-collection or collection, right, there's other facets of industry that comes in, including, regulations rather, is like DOT and, OSHA, the safety folks. I mean, it's a very heavily regulated industry.
Yeah. So before we turned on the mic here to record, you were mentioning our mutual friend here, Scott Meyer, who had introduced us and getting to the founding story of Wastebits. And so I'd love to just kind of hear how it came to be, because it sounds like a very cool story.
Yeah, it was. So I had actually approached, so my nephew owns a founder of another software company down in Akron called Segment, and I had approached him. Oh boy, it was quite a while ago. So I would say early 2000s, about the opportunity that Wastebits is actually achieving on now. And at the time, it wasn't right. The industry really wasn't ready for, collaborative systems and cloud infrastructure, things of that nature. And so back in 2012, I had approached him again about, hey, I have this idea, this opportunity where we can really begin to attack this environmental industry and provide collaboration and solutions to the key stakeholders. And so the timing was kind of perfect. And that, he said, his question to me was, what's the number one challenge that is creating all the issues and friction in the industry? And I told him it was a lack of transparency and lack of reporting. So kind of like the way we used to do our taxes back in the early days, right? We would get our forms and we'd fill them out and we'd send them in, and there was really no proof or validation. It was self-reporting. Well, the industry, for the most part, I would say for 90% of the industry itself, it's all self-reporting. And so there is no federal mandate that says you have to report unless you're the special class of waste generator. And so the one area that we chose to attack was around what we call waste characterization, and that's a regulated part of the industry that we can address. And so he at his company, he had a couple developers at the time. Scott Meyer was one of them. And Scott had a great network of friends and folks that he had worked with, and they were going to be jumping on doing this competition called Startup Bus. Never heard of it in my life, but they had Startup Bus at the time was fairly new. I think it was 3 to 4 years old, and so in effect, what it is a group of friends, software developers, biz dev folks, and they jump on this bus. There's 4 or 5 of these buses that kind of like spread out across America, and they come to some rally point. What the competition is supposed to mimic is a startup company, but they shrink it into 3 to 4 days. And so the idea is you need to build a product, you need to get MVP, you need to put the business case together, then you're going to stand on stage and you're going to pitch it in front of a bunch of investors who's going to vote on this company, whether it's a good idea, like what kind of job you did. So Scott and his friends were going to jump on this bus, and they were collecting ideas. And so I met with a group that was getting on the bus, and I happened to explain to them like the industry and why and the opportunity. And one of the gentlemen that was on Scott's team actually just happened to be from the waste industry, and I had no idea who he was. He didn't know who we were. Oh, wow. And as I was explaining, he was like, "Wait a minute. How do you know these things?" Because, and so he was able to validate to the team that, hey, what he's saying is actually true, right? There's a big problem. There's a lot of friction in this space. And so they ended up choosing our product to work on the startup bus competition. They started, I believe it was in Akron that year. I'm sorry, I take that back. They all flew to Las Vegas, and they hopped on the Las Vegas bus. And what they ended up doing is they went down to South by Southwest, and they pitched at the South by Southwest show, or whatever you call it, event. So we made it like into the semifinals, and then we ended up losing out. But we went pretty far. And so as as they all kind of flew back home, we decided, hey, look, this has a lot of merit, a lot of legs. Let's continue to work on it. So for the next year and a half, we all kind of did the evenings and weekends, garages, coffee shops, and got together and started to build out the product, and to the point where I ended up. My wife was in school as for nursing. This was all in 2013. My wife's in school for nursing. I had two boys in college, and I decided I was the only income source for the house. I decided I was going to quit my job in the waste industry and start a software company, not knowing a dang thing about software. So luckily for me, some of the co-founders ended up jumping with me, and so the rest is history.
Wow, that's an amazing story. A few threads I want to pull on there. You mentioned from a timing perspective, when maybe you first had the idea, you recognized the industry wasn't ready, and it took a few years for it to come around. What changed in the industry to get them more comfortable with a collaborative software and a collaborative philosophy?
Yeah, so it was, if you can think back to the early 2000s, heck, you might even have been born then. I'm not sure when you were born how old you are, but when you think back to the early 2000s, the idea of kind of a web presence was still fairly new. And so, when you think about things like travel, right? If you were going to visit, go to Florida on vacation, right? You would go to a holidayinn.com and see if they have rooms and how much money it's going to be. Then you go over to Marriott. And so you got all these like various sources of information. But, as the years went on, things like Priceline and Expedia and all these other things where you can just go to this one site and they're pulling in all this various components of information and they're offering it and bringing visibility, those things began to transpire. And so when we decided to launch Wastebits and kind of go with the plan of attack that we had originally thought of, we at least had things to point to and examples to use for the industry and say, look, we give that the hotel as an example, right? Or the fact that you can go onto Google and you can do research and find all the restaurants, or things like Yelp, and like so other technology helped us explain the opportunity that exists in the space to allow us to begin to get traction.
Got it. That does make a lot of sense. Just kind of the parallels in other industries and just the general trajectory of the world at that point.
Yep, for sure. And so that's honestly one of the areas that we're still kind of the only people doing what we're doing in our space. And so everything we do, we have to greenfield, from idea to concept to product market fit. It's like we don't have, a lot of times, people think about competition as a negative. I honestly think competition is great for a number of reasons. But with that said, one of the biggest things for kind of the early adopters is, it allows the market to understand that, there's other people doing similar things, and you have things that you can begin to work off of with similarities. And for us, everything that we do, we have to kind of think outside of the box, and we borrow technology from other industries and try and pull in and use those as examples to try and move the industry forward.
Yeah. So when you're on the startup bus asking this question, what if waste profiling, waste categorization was made easier? First off, just for my own edification, what is waste profiling and waste categorization? But then also, like, what is the vision that you're painting at that point for the company?
Yeah, so waste characterization, or you'll hear them called waste profiles, what it is for the regulated industry, the producer of the waste, the generator, has to explain in detail like the waste that they're going to send for disposal. So if you think about things like I'll call it paint waste, right? So even at home, you're painting with a solvent-based product. you put the paint on your wall, then you have like an acetone, you have various chemicals you use to like clean up your brushes and do different things. So when people send waste off site, they have to, at an ingredient level, tell the disposal company what's in it. And they do that for a number of reasons. Number one is health and safety, right? So they need to make sure that they can safely process it. The second thing is they have to make sure that they're permitted to actually take it. And so, the federal EPA will, work with the company and say, okay, based on your capabilities, you're approved to take these particular waste streams or these particular chemicals. And so a profile or a characterization, probably the most descriptive thing that I can use that people can generally wrap their head around, it's like a recipe, right? If you're going to make a cake, you start with a recipe and it says put, 1 cup of this, 1 teaspoon of that. That's what a waste characterization or waste profile is for waste. So it's like a recipe in reverse, where they're telling them exactly what's in it, how was it used, what was the process, and how much they have, and how are they going to package it, and so it kind of describes the transaction and what they're going to be receiving in advance. And then the waste company will take that, they look at it, they're going to do, they'll probably do some laboratory analysis. They're going to ask for safety data sheets, and then they're going to make a determination, yes, I can take this, or no, I can't. And then once they render that decision, then they communicate it.
When you're thinking about waste categorization as a problem space, coming out of this bus and thinking about it from an MVP perspective, what was the offering to the market?
Thinking back to kind of my original statement about the lack of transparency and the lack of reporting, is the industry itself, the waste companies, really kind of enjoy the fact that there's this black box where and people don't really know how much is moving through where and what and when. But with that said, thinking back to my hotel examples from the early 2000s, the way the industry works is, if you're a business and you want to, for instance, get a competitive quote on your paint waste, and you have 3 companies in the area that you want to get a proposal from, you have to go through the exact same process 3 different times. So you have to fill out this waste characterization for company A. You have to go do all the analytical and all the stuff that they want you to do. You have to go through and you have to do the exact same thing with company B. And then you have to go do the same things with company C. And all you're really trying to do is just get a price. And so, in our environment, we said, look, we will do it one time. We will then offer this opportunity to all 3 locations, who then can make a pricing decision. And once they've made the pricing decision, then the transaction can come through the infrastructure, and they can get additional information on the amount of waste and the transactions once they've already provided the pricing and they know they're going to do the business.
You mentioned kind of in the parallel industries, this is kind of the trajectory of collaboration and transparency. But you also mentioned that within the industry, that the companies themselves maybe are holding on to this opacity in the process, mm-hmm. that there is a black box. So how do you go about, with the product that you've developed, selling to them and kind of working through this behavioral change required to relinquish, what they might think of as proprietary or something that they want to protect and make it transparent?
Yeah, so it really depends on where the transaction starts, right? So sometimes our client, our customer is the waste company. And, at the end of the day, our software is really just their back-end operating system that's been privately branded for their use, right? So that transaction looks differently if that is the situation. If the generator or the waste service provider is our customer, then, right, we try and act on their behalf, right? So the industry as a whole, the technologies that they're using, as I mentioned before, right? So first off, there's a lot of different technologies that's out there, but there really hasn't been any software company that's really tried to advance in this particular market, because they, for a number of reasons, but primarily it's, people don't feel like it's a big enough space. It's so niche that everybody, they don't understand the opportunity that exists because they don't understand the market. right? And so, the area that we're playing today, we're in the early innings of the ball game, right? There's a lot of areas for us to move and improve. But at the end of the day, we're really focused on making sure that our customer and their customers have a great experience, right? And so, if they don't want to share this information with their customer, that's up to them, right? For us, right, where our customer might be, for instance, a waste generator, right? We can really work to help improve their efficiency. But it just kind of depends which side of the fence we're playing on in that particular situation.
Yeah, looking a little bit into the future, projecting out to the ninth inning rather than the early innings. How do you see this all kind of playing out? What's kind of the grander vision for the work you're doing here at Wastebits?
Ultimately, I see there being an opportunity for us to begin to really impact. You may have heard these terms like circular economy, extended producer responsibility is some of the new stuff coming out, where manufacturers are going to be responsible for their products even post-consumption. Well, because of how we collect the information and the way we get it at a very granular level about what makes up a particular waste stream. So a waste stream would be a combination of a bunch of different things. But because we understand the waste at an ingredient level, we believe that there's an opportunity for us to play in the circular economy model, where we begin to offer materials that had previously been destined for landfill and for disposal, reintroducing it back into the supply chain up on the front side of the manufacturing process, and help to ultimately reduce the reliance on our natural resources.
Wow. So, kind of working back in time from 2012, 2014, when you're on the bus, to kind of the vision there, and just kind of where are we today, and what's kind of the delta between where you would like to be and where Wastebits is today in terms of product offerings, traction in the market, things of that nature?
So I've been in the space a very, very long time. I have a lot of really good relationships with each of the stakeholders and the various levels of their organization and companies. The waste disposal industry, or the recycling industry itself, they're very resistant to change. Very resistant to change. In fact, we had a customer who has told us all the fantastic things our technology has done for their companies, including reducing the order to cash by over 80%. Tell us that they're considering going back to an Excel spreadsheet and a PDF, like completely going with technology. And you wonder, like, why, right? So is there, how do you feel, for me, I was like, how do you feel like your customers are going to respond to that, right? Especially if others continue to advance in this space. And so we're dealing with an industry that is very, very resistant to change. They do want to protect their customer base and their margins and the things that are important to them, which I certainly understand. But ultimately, I'm not sure that the ultimate goals of the waste generators. If you start researching the big generators of waste, they're talking about greenhouse gas emissions and circular economy and sustainability, and they all have these goals in their corporate missions, and the vendors don't really seem to align with that really well many times. And so there's parts of their companies that do, but for one reason or another, they haven't put the two pegs together. It don't make sense to me, but ultimately, if you think kind of what our original vision was to where we're going, I would tell you that we've served enough time in the space to prove that we're a viable company. We have a great brand in the industry. It's a pretty well-known brand at this point. We have our product has been used by about 85,000 manufacturing or waste generator locations across North America since we started. That's a lot. And so those people tend to move around a lot, various jobs. And so, when we begin to launch, additional products to help support our ultimate vision and goal, ultimately it's our hope that, the waste companies will continue to embrace us. The generators will continue to see the value in what we're producing, and then the service providers will gain from all the efficiencies that we're able to drive forward by implementing technology in the solution.
No, what you've said earlier in the conversation about how you view kind of competition as probably a good thing for you in this case, I think that makes a lot more sense now. If the customer is often asking like, well, maybe our alternative is Excel and a PDF.
Well, that's, like I said, this is a customer that's like have seen all the benefits of what technology can bring them. And they're like, maybe we just go back to an old PDF and emailing it around. It's like, okay, I'm not sure how their customers are going to feel. And, ultimately their customers will be the voice, but, it's an interesting space in that, as many years and tenure I have spent in this industry, the demographics have begun to change and change substantially. So it was primarily, I would say the average tenure for the people in the waste industry, like on the post-collection side of the business that I deal with, they're in the high 20s to 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And so, I would have guessed, if somebody would have asked me a question, where do you think the demographics are? I would say this is a 80-85% 50-year-old plus male would be driving this industry. And our demographics are actually kind of interesting. They're very surprising. We ran a study of our users of all of our platform, and we used the age group of 20 to 35, 35 to 50, and 50 plus. It was literally a third. So we're seeing the industry begin, the demographics begin to spend out. And then the other thing was that, the male to female was 61% male, 39% female, right? So we're beginning to get some diversity in this space. And, I think as the different generational gaps begin to fill in, I think the customers are going to speak the loudest, right? And it's like, I can tell you this, I have two sons that are actually in this industry as well. And they're in their mid to upper 20s. They're not going to fill out no PDF form and email it back and forth, right? They want to click on the phone and send them a link. It's like, you got to make it simple. You got to make it efficient.
Right.
We're having a lot of fun driving the industry forward, but it's, like I said, there's challenges and rewards, right? We're hoping to see more rewards than challenge.
And then part of it sounds like, is just playing the long game, right? Like setting the infrastructure, getting the company in a position to survive long enough to realize the change in the industry.
Yeah, and you're right. Right. So, I'm sure the Ubers, the Lyfts, I think the best thing that happened to Uber was Lyft coming in, right, or another car service.
Yeah.
But, think about when they fought the taxi industry and the transportation side of the business, and what Airbnb has gone through in the lodging and hotel space. And now you have VRBO and even Grubhub and like on the food and beverage, right? They've all fought this, but you're right? You got to be in it for the long haul. You gotta prove that you're not going to disappear, especially in the space in the industry that we're in, because this is regulatory and safety, and the companies doing business with, they need to make sure that you're going to be around. And so, here we are. We launched originally in 2012. We're going on our ninth, 10th year, right, originally. And we first launched our product in 2014. So, our product's been in the market for quite some time as well. So, I think we've proven that we're going to be here, and we continue to be stubborn and stay our course. And ultimately, we're hoping we can impact the market as we expect here in the next few years.
Yeah. And how in the early days was the company financed? Was it just kind of to market it immediately, or?
So that's even a better story. So one of the persons you spoke with, I listened to his podcast, was Todd Fetterman over at North Coast Angels. When I met with them, I said, when they asked me this question, I was like, this is going to be probably the best use case and class case like that entrepreneurs growing up are going to be able to study. Because how we financed our company originally is I had, because of my past roles and experience, I had a relationship with a large manufacturer in Northeast Ohio, and we launched a facility services company, which included like janitorial and inventory management. And basically, we did facilities management for this company, and we took all the profits for that other business and used it to finance the people that were working here. And so, it was very non-dilutive. It was another business that had nothing to do with software, but it was non-dilutive financing and funding. And so that's how we started. And so, bringing the North Coast Angels, when we went through the process with them, one of the steps that you would go through is they'll bring in 5 or 6 other business owners, and you sit at a round table and you talk through them. And boy, was I right. Like half of them was on the side of, hey, that's brilliant. Like, this is amazing. Like, I can't believe how you did this. And the other half is like, that has got to be like so disruptive to like your business. Why would you do those things? And like they were sitting there between themselves having discussion. It was a great discussion, but ultimately that's what we did. We launched another business to fund ourselves. And then ultimately, as we continue to grow the company, then we worked with a gentleman. His name is Bill Manby. He has a fund down in Akron right now called the Akron Fusion Fund, but he helped us at the time raise some funding from some angels down in the Akron Northeast Ohio market. And we've kind of continued down that path over the years. So we didn't do the large round. We've kind of only taken what we've needed and kind of scrapped for the rest.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Is that initial funding business still in operations in parallel with Wastebits?
No, we actually, there was a lot of discussion about, do we sell it, close it? How do we get out of this thing? And, it got forced. So the facility that we were working in actually had a major fire, and they shut down operations for 18 months. And during that time, we just chose not to restart it. So, it was good, right? We for years we had talked about, hey, we need to be very focused on this, and this can be a distraction. But we had a lot of great leadership out at the location, and so it really wasn't that distracting, honestly.
Got it. Still an incredible story, though.
Yeah, it's one of those lessons learned. If I had to do things a little bit differently, I would. I think I learned a little bit about how I would have done it, like moving forward. But it is what it is. We all learn.
What are some of those lessons?
Well, so as a separate business that has nothing to do with software, right? It's a janitorial and facility services company. The reality is it was something that I brought to the table. I probably would have just left it as a separate business altogether, and then I would have funded the company for the growth. Is probably how I would have done it, rather than just putting it in and then commingling the financials and P&Ls and things of that nature. It created a lot of challenges for the investors when they were looking to do due diligence on the company and make decisions, because they couldn't separate what part of our expenses were directly related to which business. And so ultimately we were able to separate them like as best we could. But it always we always have to answer the question, like, hey, what's this other company over here, like what's this industrial services thing, what does that have to do with software and Wastebits? Well, it has nothing to do with it. Right? So I would have left it separate. Long story short, I would have left it separate, and I just would have used I would have invested the profits out of that into Wastebits to grow it.
Got it. I am curious, with just kind of the depth of experience you have in the industry, what are like some of the things that you wish people outside of the industry knew about it, that you find yourself explaining a lot, or wish people were just more aware of?
I think that the complexity of the industry itself, and the knowledge that you have to have in order to be not only successful but efficient in this space. So as an example, there's over 4,000 different triggers that will make a waste hazardous or non-hazardous waste or regulated or something special to be done, of which you can only test for about 440 of those things. The rest you just got to know. And so, there is a lot of tribal knowledge, which is part of the issue that we're trying to solve. There's a lot of tribal knowledge that lives in this space, and it's not as easy as just pushing your can to the end of the street and magically it disappears. I would tell you at a high level and more from a social perspective, it is very easy to sit on the sidelines and point the fingers at the operators in this space and talk about things like you're contaminating you're contaminating our environment, and like things are smelly, and like they're like it's not a clean industry and it's not a clean space, but yet the same people that are having those complaints are still pushing their can to the end of the street every day or every week, right? Nobody wants to do anything about it, right? And so I would say to really for those that want to have compassion and feel the need to make a change in this particular environment, like particularly in the recycling space, to become more knowledgeable about what they need to do to impact it. Because honestly, the best way to recycle is to reduce use, right? Quit using cardboard cups, quit using, plastic containers. Use things that are reusable, right? Use glass, wash them, right? I know it's a little bit of an extra pain, but, you switching from a styrofoam coffee cup to a plastic or a paper cup, you're really not doing anything. You're still putting it in the same place, right? All the other things still have to take effect, right? So I would say that, for people that really want to have a better understanding, to understand what can they do to like impact it in a positive nature.
Are you optimistic about the prospects for that?
No, not at all, because we live in a world where convenience is more important than the mission in many times. Right. So, people want to do the right thing until, one of two things happen. It costs them more money or it begins to inconvenience them. Right. And so, in the industry, I always said, people, these big companies, they all want to recycle. Everybody wants to recycle. Right. That's one of the things. Like we want to recycle and eliminate the stuff until they find out it costs them more money, and then they're okay landfilling it again. Right. It's like, it's one of those two things. Like I said, it's either, cost or convenience. And so I'm not super optimistic until we have a society where people are willing to put in a little bit extra work to do the right thing. I know that's harsh, but that's how I feel.
No, I appreciate the candor there. Yeah. So before we kind of wrap up, I feel like there may just be more fun stories that you have about Wastebits that I haven't gotten at yet. So I'm curious if there's just anything that comes to mind that you want to share about the journey or building of the company so far before we kind of wind down.
Yeah, so I would tell you this. While I have worked for, these other companies, and most of them are the big, large Fortune 500s, Fortune 100s, I was always in the entrepreneurial side of the business. I mean, I worked for the largest waste company in the industry and launched like companies inside of theirs, right? I launched a hazardous waste broker division inside of the largest waste, like the largest garbage company there is, right? And was very successful at it. I guess I didn't realize like how much easier that is when you have that branding and the funding to do it, right? The funding, the time, the support. When you kind of jump off and do it yourself, you become very lonely, right? You become very lonely in this space, and you quickly realize that all of the things that you didn't have to worry about with these larger companies now are all like landing around your shoulders, right? And so, the story, I started telling the story about me coming home and telling my wife I was going to, quit my job in the waste industry and open a software company. And like I said, she's in college. My two sons are in college, and I have a daughter at home, and She's like, well, that's great. Well, what do you know about software? It's like, well, I don't know anything. Right? I don't know anything at all. But, I know that we have a good group of co-founders out there that will support what we're doing. And so, the original group of those co-founders was Scott Meyer. I don't know if you know any of these folks. Scott Meyer, Chris Lako, Doug Yoder, Dan Capri, Ray Lewis were kind of the primary group that originally started. And then, at this point, the only one still working in the company with me is Doug Yoder. Everybody else has, continued to chase down their own startups and their own visions. And heck, Ray's over in Europe right now. So, everybody's done a fantastic job. But more importantly, I wouldn't be here still today if it wasn't for that original group and that grit. And so I would tell you that as I did this journey, I went to a lot of startup events and conferences and things of that nature. And, there's clearly different groups of people, right? There's the people that sit on the sidelines and talk about what they want to do and what they wish they could do. And then there's the people that just say, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to jump in. And so I have a special place in my heart for those that have that grit that's like, you know what, we'll figure it out, right? Because it is not, by any means, it is not the easiest job at all, right? This, the stories of, working for companies and having them close and not getting paid and, all those things are very, very real, right? It's a very high risk position to be in. And so those that live in this space, I know I'm kind of speaking to the choir, but I didn't know to the extent, right? So I'm not sure that at the same time, I'm not sure I could ever go back and work for a company again. I've drank the Kool-Aid. I kind of love the grind and get to enjoy meeting a lot of really nice and cool people.
Yeah, no, that all resonates very, very much.
Yeah.
Well, our closing question for everyone on is we're painting a collage here, and not necessarily of people's favorite things in Cleveland and the surrounding area, but of things that other people may not necessarily know about, the hidden gems. And so with that, what are some of your hidden gems in the area?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So first and foremost, I'm going to start with the whole Guardian thing, right? The New Cleveland Guardians. I had no idea that like on that bridge, like those like two Guardian sculpture things were there. I had no idea. I've lived here my entire life. I had no idea until they said that. And I was like, oh, I guess that has been there for a long time. So, that obviously is now a new focal point in GEM. But, honestly, like if you talk about like places to go or places to see, like the park systems around Northeast Ohio are just flat amazing. Like the most beautiful places you can go. And, hopefully people get the time. The towpath, being able to do the Ohio to Erie Trail. I had a couple friends that mapped the whole thing all the way from Cincinnati all the way up to Cleveland. So rode the bikes all the way up, which was pretty cool. Down in the Akron, Hartville area, I don't know how much time people get to go down in Amish country, right? But Hartville has some really cool places. Honestly, like my hidden gems, and I get the chance because of all the travel that I do and all the people that I get to meet. The hidden gem that I always talk about in Ohio and primarily Cleveland and Akron are the people. Spending time with the people in that area, the people in the Cleveland, Ohio market, you won't find a more loyal, hardworking group of people, and that generally try and support each other anywhere. I can tell you, I've lived in a lot of places in the U.S. I've spent the last 20 years of my career on airplanes and in hotels. And I've never in my life seen people like what's in the Cleveland and Northeast Ohio area. It's something to be very proud about. And, unfortunately, the southern states always get the heck. I was in South Carolina at one point, and there was a billboard that says, "Go back to Ohio." It was a billboard on the side of the road. It was like, "Go back to Ohio," right? But down in the South, it's like, is there anybody left in Ohio? And it's like, yeah, man, there's a ton of people left in Ohio. Like, and it's like, hey, don't feel like we're picking on you. We go everywhere. But, at the end of the day, like, you won't find a nicer group of people. You won't find a group of people that I enjoy living there. they're very proud of the area where they've grown up. There's a lot of great things from cost of living to, honestly, that's my hidden gem that, people need to be a little bit more proud about where they're from. And I know we talk about it like amongst ourselves, but you know what, in a way it's good to get the word out, but you know what, maybe we don't want all those people coming to Ohio.
Yeah, well, we got dozens of listeners here, so don't worry too much about it.
Very good.
No, that's a lovely place to wrap it up here. I really appreciate, Dan, you coming on and taking the time and sharing what's been an amazing story so far. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah. I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. If folks have anything they'd like to follow up with you about, where is the best place for them to reach you?
Best way is probably email, right? dcollins@wastebits.com. I'm one of those proud guys that literally can't stand if I have a red bubble on the dot. So I can contact you, email me, I'll respond. I can't have a number. I can't have a red bubble on my email account.
I'm with you there. Well, Dan, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.